Today's story is titled The Woods in the Stairs by MisterFourLimbs. The link to the story is in the description below. Please enjoy. I loved adventures as a young boy. I never really did any adventuring or even much camping, but I loved the idea of it. Indiana Jones was a personal favorite, but anything that led people to far-off lands, exotic locales, perilous stunts, and a smile as they rode off to the next adventure would put me in my happy place. As my mom drove me around doing errands, my mind would race through fantasies about the world being so much more interesting than just a town with people hitting the day-to-day. And of course, I was always really cool in these fantasies of mine. Always strong, handsome. I would get roughed up a lot throughout my journeys, but kept powering through with pure grit and badassery, and got the girl or got the gold, usually both. While playing at home, the house became whatever locale I dreamed it to be, so long as nobody was home to see me running around and imitating what I'd seen on TV. The basement could be a dangerous cave with monsters around every corner. Heading upstairs became a trek up a snowy mountain to a shining city hidden at its peak. And the kitchen was a busy bazaar in some vaguely Middle Eastern-looking place I'd seen in a movie and knew nothing about. One time my mother came home early and rushed in when she heard me calling for help. She found me under a pile of couch cushions that played the role of quicksand, my hand reaching up to the sky as I was pulled under. I was supposed to black out and wake up sometime later with a beautiful girl nursing me back to health in her home village, but that playtime was cut short by my mother failing to hold back an adoring laugh. I ran to my room all embarrassed after that, and didn't come out until it was time for dinner. My dad tried to comfort me and share in the fun of imagination, but I couldn't help feeling teased when he asked about how my adventure went. One day, when I was 9 years old, I was traveling up the stairs and swinging my arms around to hack away imaginary vines and underbrush. As I boldly marched towards higher ground to escape a flood, I felt a chilly wind brush past my ankles. I took another step or two before I fully registered what I had felt. I looked back with my focus properly ripped away from my adventure, and in the quiet of my empty house I could hear a breeze? It was a mere whisper of a breeze, so soft that I held my breath to see if it was a trick of my ears, only to still hear its inexplicable presence. I descended and found the step in question. A cool breeze running over my toesies. How? The steps going upstairs were solid and carpeted. No space between them like the wooden stairs in the basement. I looked around in confusion, trying to see if there were some other possibility for a breeze to be localized right on that very step. After failing to find a sane explanation, I got on my knees and was eye level with that step, hoping to find a crack in it or something to help me understand. I must have been there for 20 minutes, searching and then walking away only to frustratedly go back to check again a few times on repeat. I poked around. I tried blocking the airflow with a bit of wood I found in the garage, but no matter what I did, I couldn't stop the breeze, nor could I discover its origin. Frisson flowed over my body, a result of pure sensation of excitement at finally having my own adventure. What was this mystery? What could I uncover? I'd read a book about some mystical land trapped in furniture while in school. Could it be my own little magic portal? A secret world I could escape to while at home, have fantastical experiences, then return to Earth with a newfound understanding of myself. I would have this cool secret I could never let anybody know about. It was everything I ever dreamed of. My mind became flush with the fantasy of such a possibility, emboldening me to stick with the search until I finally found it. A pinpoint light that caught my eye between the shroud of the carpet fibers. I inhaled sharply through my nose in surprise. My eyes remained wide open with the fear that if I blinked, I would never find it again. I peered closer, then slowly, carefully, with great trepidation, I reached out to gently pull the carpet away from the hole. As I did, I saw more light as the carpet was pulled aside. I pulled a bit more, and a bit more, seeing more details of the world on the other side as each tuft of carpet bent away with a polite lack of resistance. I didn't even think about the impossibility of carpet and wood rolling away like a thick blanket. Why would I? It's a hidden world. It's all magic. Let's just get in there and see what's on the other side. Piece by piece, I saw a forest and heard the noises therein. I could smell the fragrant aroma of pine and mountain air. The whisper breeze became a flowing hum of wind. Bird songs called out from distant treetops, and the shadows on the forest floor danced and waved at me invitingly with the sway of the trees. I peeled back enough of the carpet to make a little window just big enough for me to crawl through. As excited as I was, I realized no good adventurer travels without supplies. I was giddy, giggling with excitement and humming the Indiana Jones theme song with cringy enthusiasm. I dumped out my school backpack, immediately regretted the mess of pencil shavings that poured out with my books onto the bed, then shook my head and kept going. Didn't have time to waste on school right now. Adventure was out there. I packed up some food and water for the trip, a Swiss Army knife and a small box of emergency supplies from the last camping trip I'd been on. I forced a thin blanket and a small pillow in there, a flashlight with some extra batteries, my Game Boy, also with extra batteries, and a manga that I really enjoyed. Had nothing to do with the fan service. Of course, I brought a notebook and my pencil box. Every adventurer needs a journal, after all. I dressed in jeans, a long-sleeve shirt, some hiking boots I'd hardly used, a winter jacket, and a beanie. Overall, I felt pretty prepared despite my scant camping experience. I hustled over to the stairs and pushed my backpack through while crawling forwards. And just like that, I'd made it. Wherever it was, I was there. I looked behind me and saw the little tunnel, carved out of a boulder within the forest. I wish I had spray painted to mark the spot, but it's not like we had any in the house anyways. I reassured myself that I'd done my best to prep for the journey, and decided to write some notes about the location to help me find it in the future. Finally, I turned around to observe the forest and let the adventure begin. It didn't look all too different from an earthly springtime forest as I'd seen before, to be honest. Beautiful and majestic, to be sure, but altogether normal. I tried to mark out my path on some trees with the saw blade of my knife, but it took a lot of effort and time to carve anything into the trees with such a small blade, so I quickly gave up on the idea. It was about an hour of wandering while using a distant mountain as my North Star before he crossed my path. At a beautiful river in the forest flanked by picturesque rock banks to either side, I saw an elderly man walking towards a large rock. He had a stereotypical fisherman's bucket hat and a cargo vest with fish hooks all around it. He carried what I assumed to be a tackle box and a bucket in one hand and a fishing pole in the other. At first, I assumed he had some really big fuzzy pants on, but after he sat down on the rock and took in a deep breath of the crisp afternoon air, I realized I was very wrong. This wasn't a man. It was a satyr or some form of goat man. He was skinny aside from his big poofy legs that ended in hooves, and sported a tuft of chestnut-colored beard on his chin that matched the fur on his legs. He had a quaint, friendly appearance to him, particularly in the way that he sung out a happy tune. He sung while filling his bucket with some water and casting out his fishing line. He tapped his hoof on the rocks in time with his song and seemed at peace. I couldn't help but want to reach out. If the stories I'd love held true, this guy would be my introduction to the broader world. I stepped out of the forest and adjusted my backpack, then waved to him from across the river. "Hello there!" He was lightly startled from the predictable peace of the forest, and looked around to find the source of the disturbance. His eyes finally found me, and he took a moment to take in the curious sight of a random human child waving hello. He raised his hand and waved back.
Greetings, Ara! Hello! Fine weather today, yes?
He scrambled for footing in his sentence and felt off balance at best by the end of it. I responded with a jovial tone. Yeah, it's pretty nice today. I began walking to the edge of the river and looked for a rock path to cross to the other side as I spoke. I'm new in town. My name's Connor. I began hopping between rocks to cross over and meet the satyr. Each jump felt exciting. Even though I could easily stand in the river, it was much more fun to think of it like a challenge and avoid getting wet. After all, I may have had to do something in the future where I really couldn't risk falling into the water. Who knows what's out there?
Connor, you say?
The satyr scratched his chin, taking in the name. I noticed he had a tinge of an Irish accent.
Never heard a name like that before. I'm Ililin. Pleasure to meet you, Connor.
We spoke for a while, and he told me of the world around us. He spoke of fairies, trolls, giants, elves, and all the other fantastical creatures he knew of in those lands. He said he had never seen much of the world beyond those woods and a town a few miles away, but the town had many travelers, so he was able to hear all sorts of stories from their travels. It sounded like this world had everything I'd ever wanted. Riches, exotic locales and foods, beautiful women, and fantasy creatures, cities beyond my imagination. I was brimming ear to ear as we spoke, and I told him of my homeworld. Told him about machinery, skyscrapers, metal ships that flew like birds across the sky, movies, radio, and so much more. Time flew by quickly, and before I knew it, the afternoon had shifted to twilight.
Oh!
Ililin said as he realized the time.
Goodness me, oh my. Seems I've taken up your whole day, friend. I apologize. You have so much more to see beyond an old man fishing on a rock.
Oh, shoot. No, I'm sorry. You were trying to fish and... He waved away my apology.
No, young man. It's perfectly fine. I can catch fish any day. But a wanderer from another world? Can't say I've ever caught that before.
We shared a good-natured laugh as he packed up his supplies, and I put my backpack on again. I brought a finger to my lips in thought before speaking. Could you tell me how to get to that town you mentioned? He furrowed his brow.
Oh, of course. But you don't want to go there now, do ya? I wouldn't even attempt the trip at nighttime, and I know where I'm going.
Oh, He had a great point, and I had no ideas of what to do aside for camp out for the night. He stood upright and smiled.
How's about you shack up with me for the night, and I can guide you in the morning?
I perked up and nodded. Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you, Ililin.
Ililin,
he politely corrected me. I corrected myself and sounded it out again, and he approved. Walking through the forest to his shack, I now started to see fantastical bits of the world around. Trees had subtle wavy lines and swirls in the grooves of their bark and the posture of their branches. Flowers closed with the sound of the twinkle as night fell. The chirping of birds was replaced by the deep, bassy plucks of some unseen creatures. Fairy light shined gently in shifting colors as they danced around and sung melodically. The stars above shined in a glorious splendor around the double moons, whose crescents faced each other in silent conversation. Ililin's home had a ray of fairies lounging around, seemingly tipsy from some alcohol he had left out in a mason jar for them. He spoke of how he enjoyed providing to the fairies. They were wonderful company on lonely nights, though they could be a bit grabby and flirty when the alcohol flowed through them. I thought of how a fairy would be a fun first kiss story, but as some fairies looked over to me and remarked on how cute or handsome I was, I grew nervous and awkwardly thanked them as I walked away. I hope it came off as politeness rather than social panic. Ililin's home was a bit chilly, but the warmth of the fire he started quickly permitted me to take off my jacket and beanie to hang them on the coat rack along with my backpack. The kind satyr set up some soup to warm up by the fire as he grabbed something akin to a banjo and offered to play a song for me. I was delighted at the chance and reclined into his couch to experience music from a foreign world. The door was to my left, the fire before me, and Ililin sat on the stool next to it. As the fire crackled and he tuned the strings, I felt a deep relaxation and contentment. What a great first day. But that thought was followed by a bit of nervousness as the logic of my mind began to ask questions. In the rush of adventure, I had completely ignored all doubts and fears. But now that I was preparing for the evening's rest, all those pre-sleep thoughts made themselves known. Would I be able to get home? What if my family misses me? Stranger danger. He seems nice, but oh no. What if nobody can find me here? Nobody knows I'm here. I began to think about fairy tales, and Hansel and Gretel specifically came to mind. The thought of being lured by sweets only to become a meal for some witch in the woods. I remembered seeking out the grim fairy tales because I wanted to be cool and read the real thing, not the Disney version. I remembered how many of their stories had gruesome and painful things happen, and then I noticed Ililin had begun playing his banjo, except the sound of it was off-key. It was uncomfortably uncanny. His melody was slow and ominous. It filled my chest with a tightened panic, and I tried to breathe deeply to calm myself down. The soup grew hot and began to boil. I looked away from Ililin for a moment to see the boil rolling over and falling into the fire in hissing sizzles. When I looked back to him, Ililin's skinny and unassuming body had shifted to become broadly shouldered and intimidatingly built. The tuft of beard was now pointed. The fluffy fur of his legs had become matted and clung to his body to reveal the thick muscles beneath. His arms were disproportionately long now. The elbow that had rested on his knee now extended halfway to the floor. His fingers were long and skinny with sharpened claws that somehow could pluck the strings of the banjo without cutting them. His head had been tilted down to watch the banjo, and I feared what his face would look like. His gentle breathing had shifted to a heavy, throaty growl. The songs of the forest critters warped to perversions of the peace and wonder I'd felt before. The warmth of the fire now made me sweat, and my eyes began to search for my bag to plan for an escape. I watched in horror as the coat rack's arms began to curl upwards, like an open hand slowly forming a fist. I looked back at Ililin and froze as I saw him looking right back at me, silent banjo in his hand as the soup kept bubbling and spilling. His face was once that of a kind, elderly man. Wrinkles of wisdom gave his skin texture, his eyes were a bit sunken, and his prominent cheekbones gave him a lengthy face leading down to his narrowed chin. But in that moment, those wrinkles looked like the gnarled wood of an ancient and wicked tree beast. His eyes were recessed deep into his skull, with a faint white light that glowed from within. His cheekbones were made into sharp, angular shelves from which taut skin cascaded down to the narrow chin, which seemed so much lower than it ever was before. His mouth was a thin line, emotionless as his eyes looked into mine. It hardly moved as he spoke.
"Connor, it's dinner time."
He stood up, his average height having grown so much that he needed to crouch to fit in his own home.
"The soup is ready. All it needs is my catch of the day."
I inhaled shakily as my heart pounded with adrenaline. I took rapid breaths as my body instinctually screamed in fear, and all of my muscles sprang into action to run for my life. Ililin lunged at me, and in my scramble I fell to the floor, narrowly avoiding the wide sweep of his claws as he tried to snatch me up. I rolled when I hit the floor to keep moving and raced to the coat rack. Its curled arms raised my belongings out of reach, so I pulled it to the floor and yanked off my backpack as quickly as I could. I didn't look back at Ilalin, terrified to see him again. Thinking back to it, I don't know how he didn't catch me before I got my backpack. He certainly should have, but I'm grateful he didn't. I ran out of the front door and tossed it shut behind me. The fairies gathered before my eyes, flirting with me like lewd pirates home from months overseas. "Hey, stud, why don't you show this lady a good time? The untainted pickle tastes the sweetest, sugar. Come on, look how you're dressed. You're practically asking for it." I brushed and waved them away like a swarm of mosquitoes. Their lights disoriented me, giving me even more trouble to try and find my way in the pitch black of night. I could hardly recall the path back to the river, and I hoped that using the moons as a reference would guide me home. My legs ran as hard as they could, and I tried my best to protect my face from the branches in my way.
"Connor!"
The goat man called out.
"It's dangerous out there. Let me hold your hand. I'll keep you safe."
His voice carried a rasp of menace, the likes of which I'd never heard before. I heard the trees and underbrush being tossed aside and broken to bits as he pursued me. The patterns of the trees turned into horrific faces, evil and sharp in expression, as they laughed or glared at the panicked child fleeing for his life. The flowers rang out like death knells as I brushed against them, or the wind of my motion disturbed their rest. Those deep, plucking noises I heard before became war drums pounding at my ears, and the fairy lights glowed in varying shades of red in the shape of eyes watching me from all sides. As I tripped and hit my face into the trunk of the tree, the fairies loudly laughed at my expense. Before I could stand back up, I heard the goatmen yell out from far off in the forest with glee.
"Ah, there you are!"
I felt a horrendous pain in my back after hitting the forest floor, and instinctively reached back to hold it as I stood up. My hand was wet. Even in the glowing red light of the fairies, I could tell it was blood, and a lot of it. Guess I didn't completely dodge those claws after all. I sprinted as fast as I could, despite the crying of my legs for mercy. I felt a twinge of triumph once I could hear it ahead, the river. When I broke through the forest clearing and laid eyes upon it, it suddenly occurred to me that I never should have been able to hear the river at all. I only heard it then because it had become a roaring torrent that raced in a choppy, chaotic mess, threatening to swallow me up if I made one misstep across the rock bridge. I had no time to care for its threats. I only had time to act. I ran up to where I remembered the rocks being, but in the dark of night amidst rapid, dark waters, I would never be able to locate them. I swung off my backpack and forcefully set aside any pain I felt in my back so I could focus on the task at hand. I reached into the front pocket of the backpack and snatched up the flashlight, reset the pack on my back, and swiftly scanned the river until I saw the bridge, my only hope. The rocks were slick, and they seemed further apart than before. I heard the monster behind me breaking apart trees to force his way through the forest, but I couldn't rush lest the river take me. I plotted out my path forward, took 2 steps back, and took a few steps to build momentum before making my escape. With each bound across the wet rocks, I struggled to keep traction, and halfway through, I felt my control slipping. I forced myself to leap again and again, terrified that stopping would cost me everything. On the last leap, my foot finally slipped out from under me, massively undercutting my trajectory. As my body was brought under the pitch-black current, I reached forward desperately to grab for land, but only found rough water. As I was pushed downstream, all of my sense of direction was tumbled and jumbled in my head. Thankfully, my instinct paid off. I balled up and covered my head, protecting it from the impact of smashing up against the rock bank of the river. I quickly reached out and tried to hold on to the bank, sending me into a twirl. I may have lost control, but at least my head poked up over water for a moment before I was pushed under again. I took a gulp of water by accident as I gasped for air and fought the urge to cough it up so I could focus on what mattered. I remembered some advice I'd seen in a cartoon about floating downstream and tried my best to float with my feet first to catch anything I may ram into. Sadly, the current was too chaotic to hope for such a thing. My foot managed to catch the edge of the riverbank, and I was able to scramble on the rocky, painfully rigid shore of hope. I took a few more tumbles and hit against the rocks before finally managing to secure a hold and free myself of the river's flow. Every muscle in my body ached, both from the beating I had taken and the overexertion of my young, untrained muscles thanks to the magic of adrenaline. I could feel that if I stopped too long, I would break down and be unable to move. Every desperate breath of oxygen burned on the way down from the cold air, and my lungs felt like they were on fire, about to burst from overuse. So much within me wanted to quit, just lay there, and if we die, we die. But I was almost there, dear God. I was almost there. One last run to the exit. Less than an hour if I can keep my legs running past any sense of exhaustion I may feel. I forced myself to stand. I forced myself to step. My leg buckled and I fell down, my knee banging into a sharp point of a rock and my elbow following suit. I began to cry. The pain and fear and stress was too much for me to fight back against that childish reaction. After a while, I gritted my teeth and banged the side of my fist into the ground to hype myself up, and my crying blended into a roar against every thought in my head. All that remained afterwards were up, move, hand, knee, push up, go, step, there is no pain, there is no pain, go, go, go. My mind fought to think of only the next action. Each step was my entire world, and even the sound of the goatman calling out to playfully tease his threats didn't break my focus. Forward is all that mattered. I don't know how long it took. I don't know how I found the strength to get there, and I have no idea how I ended up finding it at all. But in the darkness of the forest, lacking any and all fairies or whimsy, I saw it. A pinpoint light shrouded amidst the forest floor. If I had any energy or life in me beyond mechanical focus, I may have been excited. At that moment, it was simply the next thing that needed to happen. I kept my eye trained on it, pushing my way through branches without a shred of tact or finesse. My face was being lashed by thin branches that retaliated against me. My right eye took a particularly sharp strike, causing it to water profusely and refuse to open. I was only a few seconds away from reaching the light when I heard him.
Connor! Wait!
I tried to pick up speed. I could no longer run, only able to hobble forward in hurried half steps as my legs struggled to keep me from tumbling to the ground. My arms swung in a desperate effort to build a momentum my legs could not. I heard him breaking apart trees and kicking aside brushes as he approached. His hooves cracked into stone with each hefty step thundering behind me.
Connor! I'm so hungry!
His voice had a hiss shrouded within the rasp. The sharp sound of his breath raced through the chilly air to nip at my ears and heels. I got to the little tunnel in the rock, flung my backpack forwards, and fell down to the ground before forcing myself to crawl.
Connor!
As I pushed my backpack through the tunnel and tried to breach the entrance to my home, the thud of his steps pounded right up behind me. I heard him let out a satisfied roar as he fell to the ground behind me and clenched my ankles in his hands. I reached through the tunnel and could feel my hands latch onto the step, clinging to that carpeted door to freedom for dear life. I felt my ankles pulled up, forcing my belly from the ground as he held me there. My arms and hands did everything they could to keep me from slipping back into that beast's possession.
Ah, look at these little piggies. They're so cute I could just gobble them up.
My face and voice broke into pure, unadulterated anguish. I felt the white-hot pain of sharpened fangs biting into the front half of my foot. My boots were ripped apart as the monster crunched and tore and shredded them from my feet. He went back and forth between both feet, not bothering to rush through his meal. He scrapped off chunks, lapped up at the open wounds, worked through the bones to spit them back out, and crunched through the front half of each foot entirely before tearing away to munch it all down. My throat felt like it was bleeding from how much I had screamed. My muscles were at their limit. No, they were past their limit. My fingers were about to lose their purchase when, whether it was a mercy from the goat man or pure dumb luck, my ankles slipped through his grasp. My body moved on its own, clambering through the tunnel. Behind me, I could hear the monster gulping me down. It sounded drunk from the meal, as though it had tasted the most exquisite flavor of its life. I didn't look back. I pulled myself forward in such a hurry that my body rolled and fell down the stairs. I tumbled and grabbed onto the railing to catch myself, flinging my feet forward before I hit the landing of the stairs and rolled forward. I ended up crashing into the wall, back on the floor and butt resting against the wall. As I laid there, disoriented with my heart bashing up against my ribs, my mind became entirely empty. So many thoughts and feelings all smashed together, making a blanket of white noise that obstructed any thoughts at all. I didn't even realize my mother had returned home to find me all splayed out.
"Oh, how'd they get you this time, hun? Did they throw you off a mountain?"
My father walked in behind her, carrying seemingly every bag from the grocery store along his arms.
Must have been really bad. That screaming was something else.
He set the bags down in the kitchen and walked back into the living room, hands on his hips.
You should get into voice acting, little man. Damn near had me running in to help you.
The both of them shared a giggle, and I realized my right eye was open and perfectly fine. I looked down and saw my toes sticking out of half-eaten boots. My backpack was completely soaked through, laying beside me. My aches and pains were gone, aside from the tumble I took down the stairs. It didn't take long for them to realize I was disturbed by something. They asked questions like any concerned parents would, but I just insisted that everything was fine. They reassured me that they wouldn't judge me for anything. They insisted they would be understanding. They offered therapy if I needed to talk to someone else about it. Many years later, they still wonder what happened that fateful day, and I always brush it aside and never give them an answer. I did, however, give them an apology for ruining those boots and what was ever in my backpack. R.I.P. manga boobs. I went on to be a PE teacher and eventually a fitness influencer, trying to inspire kids to take care of their fitness. Above all else, I emphasize the importance of running. I tell people it's great for your mental health, it keeps you feeling fit, it keeps your knees healthy, and every other reason I could think of to inspire them to take up running. All I can do is hope that some overly imaginative kid will take my advice before they feel an impossible breeze brushing against their ankles.